Welcome to a Wednesday, February 4th edition of Daily Faceoff Live, presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Jonny Lazarus, filling in today for Tyler Yaremchuk. I'm joined, as always, by Carter Hutton. We got David Pagnotta joining in a few minutes. We'll talk about all the trade rumors happening today with the freeze happening in just 3 short hours. So lots of nervous energy where I am right now around New York. Not sure about the energy in Thunder Bay. Carter, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, but you know what's nice? It'll be a treat because normally everyone gives Ty a hard time about being a homer for Edmonton, but now we got a homer for New York today. And there's a ton of good storylines, Jonny. I'm excited to have you here. I thought I might get promoted to the left side of the screen, but they kept me in my place. They know where I belong, buddy.
And I will actually do the opposite of Tyler. I'm a hater for Edmonton. I think Oilers fans think that I hate them. So it'll be a bit of a different feel today, especially after that game last night. I will say, the Leafs and Oilers game last night was pure entertainment. The back and forth between let's go Oilers and go Leafs go chants, like those were so fun to be a part of and watch. And it's always a treat when you get to watch Sportsnet too down here in the States. I love the Sportsnet broadcast. They always do a great job.
It is too. I'm biased toward the Canadian broadcast too, especially playoff time, and you can get that. And the good thing is with Toronto, though, they travel well, right? So you knew there was going to be energy in that building, and it was something that I dealt with when I played with Chicago with the Blackhawks. We traveled down to different areas, and it felt like a home game at times. And I was victim of it in Buffalo when we played Toronto or the Habs. I'd be getting out booed as I stepped on the ice because they travel so well.
That stuff's the best. I think some players thrive under that too. But while we're talking Canada, Huts, one of the big topics in today's show, the first topic that we'll talk about is Sam Bennett being named to Team Canada yesterday to replace Anthony Cirelli. Seems like a no-brainer of a decision. Maybe the fans who are looking for more entertainment might have wanted Connor Bedard. If Tyler was sitting here, he probably would have wanted Zach Hyman. But what did you make of the decision to go with Sam Bennett for Team Canada?
Well, I think it's piece out, piece in, right? Like you're thinking about what Anthony Cirelli brings to the table in his defensive game and the role that he is going to play in that manner. And again, there was that argument before, right? Ty and I talked about this earlier in the week when Cirelli went down, who is that replacement player? I don't think we had Bennett as high as we thought because we thought maybe someone else plugs into those minutes. But I think the transition and the familiarity with John Cooper as well from the Four Nations Cup is the fact that he can come in and play in this role. He's adaptable. He was in and out of the lineup that time. And I thought he got better as the tournament on in the Four Nations Cup. And this is a guy that has grit, right? And that is an important factor that Cirelli brought to the table is he can play those minimal minutes. He's responsible. And I think numbers wise, they're not bad. He's played better as of late on a struggling Florida Panthers team, but Sam Bennett can be a big, big X factor, which he showed last year scoring a big goal against Team USA.
I mean, it's also the Conn Smythe Trophy winner from last year too, right? When it comes to playing in the big games, is there a more proven guy than Sam Bennett? Did you see any comments from Canadians disagreeing with this decision? I imagine there were a lot of angry Oilers fans who wanted Zach Hyman, but for me in the States, this feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a factor of where you go in the market too, right? I'm sure if you pegged anywhere around Winnipeg, they'd be like, well, Mark Scheifele should be the guy, right? Yeah. Then you travel a little further west and you hit Edmonton and they're talking about Zach Hyman. And there's different players that fit that role. But it being said, I feel like this is the position that Cirelli was in where he can come in and kind of play in that role. And this is a problem that I guess it's a good thing and a bad thing. And I make this argument a lot because, Jeff Merrick talks about this, how talent adapts. We'll adapt to those roles, right? And I think this is a problem we have because there's so many good players. But that being said, if you're going to be Sam Bennett and you're only going to play minimal minutes, you're used to this. You've just proven that you can play in this. It's the same factor of making the argument that Jordan Binnington starts game one, and it is the guy after a horrendous season that he's had because he has that experience, because he has those accolades. And this is something that I think we highlighted a bit yesterday with Connor McDavid, talking about just managing the moment. When you look across the room and he's talking about Sid and Marchand and Doughty being in the room, Sam Bennett has that effect. This is a guy that wins Stanley Cups. This is a guy that won the Four Nations. There's a calming factor than adding in a new piece who's never been there before.
Yeah, and it's always fun to watch Sam Bennett and Connor McDavid be on the same team. I think they grew up playing together as well in Toronto, so cool to see a little reunion there. But while we're talking Panthers, our next topic of conversation, we're going to talk about teams that are on the outside of the Eastern Conference right now, trying to work their way back in. The Panthers have a big game tonight on home ice against the Boston Bruins. Feels like a must-win game. That game's on TNT. You can catch that here in the States on TNT, but Carter, we're looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins in a playoff spot, the New York Islanders in a playoff spot, the Boston Bruins in a playoff spot. Those are three teams right there that I don't think anyone would have anticipated to be in the playoffs. And then in the Atlantic, I mentioned Boston, but you got Detroit and Buffalo in a playoff spot. We got five teams that no one really expected to be in the playoffs that are in, and five teams in Toronto, New York, Florida, Jersey, and maybe Washington that are outside looking in right now. Like, which team do you see, if you could pick one of each, one to fall out, one to get in, like which teams are you looking at right now in the East?
So, for me, this is the tricky part, right? Because this is a big turnover tour. I think when we talk about predicting regular seasons and predicting where we're going to be, if this is back at the start of the year, nobody saw this big of a turnover. And I think a bit of a stretch for me is going to be the Boston Bruins. I think this is a team that's played very well. They've got good goaltending, passionate. Morgan Geekie's been a great story. Alex Steve, all these other pieces. I just don't know if they're going to be ready enough to hold off what's coming. And what's coming is the Columbus Blue Jackets is another team that is pushing. There's a couple other teams. Again, Toronto just winning 3 straight. I feel like out of those 5 teams on the outside looking in, there's going to be a lot of pressure nipping at the heels of Boston Bruins. And the fact that this team doesn't seem to have the depth that I think they need to have to sustain the post-Olympic break push, in my personal opinion, Johnny.
For me, it's hard to see the Pittsburgh Penguins really holding their ground. I watched that game last night. The Penguins were on Long Island taking on the Islanders, and they were the much better team. I thought that was a game the Penguins should have won, but and I hate to, point at a goalie, especially while I'm talking to a goalie. Stuart Skinner didn't come up with the saves, and I know Stu's been really good since the trade to Pittsburgh, but last night, that's a game that the Pittsburgh Penguins should hold on and win. And, this has been a team that's really confused me throughout the year because their roster is obviously in this like weird transition phase where they're hanging on to guys like Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and they have these youngsters like Kindle, I think that's how you pronounce it. Anthony Manthas had a great year. He scored his 20th goal last night, but I'm still trying to figure out what they are. And I don't see them as a team that's going to, ride through the back 9 of the season on a hot streak. And I think they'll be the ones to fall out. And, obviously Columbus is the easy one to point out right now and say they'll get in, but I still have a hard time counting out the Florida Panthers. Do you feel that way about Florida? Like, I just don't, I'm not confident in saying they'll miss the playoffs.
Well, you know what? It feels like these last few games and a couple losses you want to highlight, right? The Buffalo Sabres ones, the late game against the Winnipeg Jets. It feels like time is starting to run out, right? You're 9 points back now with the Boston Bruins for the second wild card. Tonight feels like more than ever a must win. And again, I think it is a team that can push, but this is a team that's a year older and a little more tired because of 3 cup runs in a row. And you look at the wear and tear that goes into your core players playing that much extra hockey. So I've never believed that I would be saying this, but it feels like the tide is turning a little bit when I look at the Montreal Canadiens and Buffalo Sabres and the Wings and these younger teams that are starting to push through in the Atlantic, that teams are trending in that direction. And as for other teams that I don't think are going to turn back at this point, I think the Wings are in there. They look like a great team.
Agreed.
The Islanders don't feel like they're ready, but again, that was a great win last night. So this is going to be a fun chase down the stretch as we try to figure out the new playoff format look in the East here.
And what's wild too, just looking at the standings, like, the New York Islanders 67 points and the Vegas Golden Knights 64 points. The Edmonton Oilers 64 points. Like, it's weird to think that the teams in the Western Conference, the top teams that we're used to seeing, like a Vegas, like a Edmonton, would be behind the New York Islanders in the East. It's been a totally bizarre season in the East, but let's stick with some of the teams in the Eastern Conference. We got to talk about this turnaround for Columbus and the turnaround for Buffalo. Columbus feels like it's a little bit more of this team's just turning it around with a new coach bump, but Buffalo, way more sustainable with like a 24-25 game stretch here of playing really good hockey. So which one to you is maybe a bigger surprise, or which one is more enjoyable for you with these turnarounds that you're seeing?
Well, I obviously I'm a little more biased toward Buffalo just because of the impact it's had on me and my family and what's gone on. I think more shocking in the sense of the change coming at the management level and having such an impact on a team where, like, I think back to playing in the NHL for those of you that, like, obviously not everyone has been in that experience. Sometimes the general manager is like irrelevant to the team. Like, you're not even around him. You have no idea. You see him come and go. He's on the plane when you get on. That's about all you deal with by any means. But then when you talk about a head coach, this is someone you're in the trenches with, right? Like, so the impact that this has had in Columbus makes more sense to me Where in Buffalo, it's like just the managerial change, and to have this much of a dramatic impact, to go from 500 hockey to 18-4-2 is unbelievable in my personal opinion. Where when we look at Columbus 9-1 under Rick Bowness, it makes more sense to me, right? Like, and I understand the change. And what I wonder, Johnny, a question to you is like, as we've seen these two changes from GM being fired to a head coach being fired, do other teams look at this template and say like, okay, we have a good core, we need to tinker somewhere else and make that change? And, you know, when you think about the Philadelphia Flyers, they were booing Tocchet last night. You think about some of these teams where, is there a coaching change or GM change a little more eminent because of the results from these other teams?
Well, the GM one is interesting too, and you can point to the Nashville Predators. Barry Trotz the other day steps down as GM, and I think a part of that too is, you know, which guy do you trust to turn teams around? And, you know, Buffalo, obviously with Kevin Adams and whatnot, they haven't made many moves yet since Kevin Adams' departure. Obviously, Josh Doan signs that extension. That's like the one thing I can think of off the top of my head. But you need someone at the helm that you can trust to build the right team, so then you can bring in the right coach. I think it's almost like the chicken and the egg, right? You need the right GM, you need the right roster, and then you bring in the coach after that team's already built. How many times have we seen, you know, coaches behind a bench of a team that doesn't play to the style they want them to play to? I think that's, you know, one of the bigger things in the NHL, and you would know that for sure as a player, right, Huts?
Yeah, 100% too. And again, I think Barry Trotz is an interesting one, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday with Merrick. Just in the sense of, I don't know how much it's going to impact that team. It seems like there's a lot of pride in that room, and there's a lot of veteran leadership that is trying to push through. I think as you look at these teams we've talked about that are on the outside looking in, I think there's a great question in the chat here just about the Leafs. From Randy, asked DFO, do you think the Leafs could trade one of their big core? And I think at this point, the Leafs winning 3 straight gives them a bit of confidence. But if it starts to waver, I think everyone's in play in Toronto. Truthfully, I don't think you're going to see maybe a Matthews or a Nylander, but I could see like them trying to move off of Morgan Riley. I could see them maybe trying to move Anthony Stolar or somewhere in that direction, because Hildeby has played so well. So these are teams that are going to have to take an honest look at their lineup and where do you assess a team? And I think that's something that's so important as you're chasing a playoff run. Is it more important to finish 9th and a few points out of the wild card spot, or finish lower in a draft where you get into that lottery and you end up getting a pick? It can really change the whole forecast of your team and your dynamic, how is you're built as the cap's going up here. You go buy, if you get a good pick and you buy someone in free agency, your whole organization changes.
The Leafs question is tricky though, because all of those core players have no move clauses. You know, you look at Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, and Riley, like all 4 of them, they've got no moves. So which one are you realistically getting out of there, especially in the middle of the season? That's probably more of a conversation over the summer, right? If you're trying to change up the core in Toronto. But, you know, again, I think Leafs fans, you know, they're always, we're out and then we're back in. It's a roller coaster of emotions in Toronto. But Carter, before we get to David Pagnotta, do you want to do our Ask DFO segment here? I believe we're going to talk about Matthew Schaefer, who again scored a goal last night, his 16th, I believe, of the season. Was it 16 last night?
Yeah, 16.
He's getting closer to Phil Housley's record of 19 goals as an 18-year-old defenseman. Matthew Schaefer continues to be, I'm just going to say, quote unquote, different. He's shown it since day one of stepping into the NHL. And how much fun are you having watching this kid play?
It's been electric too, right? And a guy that isn't really overly sized too in that standpoint, right? So he's got 16 goals, right, at the age of 18, and he's chasing Phil Housley at 19. He just passed Bobby Orr, which is unbelievable. And there's no signs of stopping too. I don't know how it hits with you as a Rangers fan. Just his comments and confidence. And I think at times it comes off arrogant and confident, and I love it. This is what we need, right? As NHL, we talked about this before. Like, this is a guy that goes out there and he proves it every single night. And I think he's changed this organization, and he's made a bunch of believers there. And this is an organization that was close to getting to a Stanley Cup final. You think back to that conference final against the Tampa Bay Lightning and stretching that series as long as they could. They need a superstar on the island, and this is the kid. So I feel like it's just inevitable until he breaks it. He's got 57 games in, and he's got this many goals. I just think it's a matter of time until he breaks the record, and a record that I like. That was from 82-83. Like, I don't know if anyone is going to break that record again. It seems crazy to think of.
And think about the Olympic break for a kid like him, right? You talk about slowing down or hitting a wall. Having a nice 3-week break for an 18-year-old defenseman is the perfect opportunity for him to hit the ground running, once the players return in late February. And, for Matthew Schaefer, as a Ranger fan, I think I speak for most fans outside of Long Island. We've all fallen in love with him. Even if you want to say his comments are, cocky, arrogant, whatever word you want to use, he's such a genuine, like, sweetheart to his core that it comes off and almost like, all right, I'm still rooting for this kid. It's going to be very hard for him to have haters, but I will say, if he keeps saying the Islander fans are louder than the Ranger fans, he will definitely get some haters pretty quickly. But I love the kid. He's been so fun to watch in this area. It's been such a vibrant energy that I think the Islanders organization has needed, and we're lucky. Like, I feel lucky as a Ranger fan, even getting to watch him, every night here out in New York.
Well, I think the other value too is, like, as a Ranger fan, right? I think you have to love the fact that it, like, rekindles that hatred too. And the rivalry and what makes New York hockey what it is, right? Like, and it's funny, like, I think back to my days when I first, get in the NHL and you're playing and you're hearing, like, the Potvin sucks chants, and I'm playing as Rangers. I don't even play on the Islanders, right? It's just something that is so cool and unique in the history of the game. And I think that's where it gets heightened because of, where, like, Schaefer has come from. And again, play defense in the NHL is so tough. Like, just like goaltending, it's something where we don't really rush it like we would a forward. You could protect a forward a little more than you can a D or a goalie. So for him to do this as a true 18-year-old is pretty unbelievable.
And that's the thing too. I've had that conversation with a couple of people about how, it feels like it takes defensemen longer to develop. But what I've learned, at least hearing from coaches and whatnot, it seems that way just because defensemen's mistakes are maybe more noticeable than a forward would be. Like, young forwards still struggle, but how many times do you hear the saying, Carter, where if you don't notice a defenseman, that's a good thing, right? Like, it's a good thing. It means they're not turning over the puck. So, I know that's a big topic of conversation, but we are going to switch gears because we do have the man, the myth, the legend, David Pagnotta, who's been in a different hockey rink, it feels like, every night over the last 2 weeks. So we're happy to have you. It looks like you're in a hotel room, but where are you coming to us live from?
I'm still in Tampa. I'm milking as much sun as I can before I have to go back to Toronto tonight. But yeah, I was in for the Stadium Series game, was at the Bolts Sabres game last night. So I'm still here, and it's actually nice. It's nice outside.
So Dave, I think Tampa Bay might put you on staff, buddy, because those 2 games that you went to are 2 huge comebacks, right? Like, you're the comeback king right now down in Tampa.
Yeah. Oh man, this is an exciting team. Like, they've got, and especially last night, I mean, it was basically their first line: Hagel, Gensel, and Kucherov against the Buffalo Sabres. What they were able to do to limit, especially in the first 2 periods, Buffalo's chances, their shots on net, their just overall attack in general. And then the Sabres kind of finally caught a bit of a groove in that 3rd period. But this is such a good team, and they find these very solid, complementary, and tangible pieces that just help shut down the opposition. It's a testament to their development staff, their scouting staff, and the coaching staff in putting this all together, because the system, and this goes back to, way back when, they started to get on these runs, even beforehand. The system that Coop has in place in the NHL level is very similar, if not the same, that they instill in the A. So when you come up, it's the transition is not seamless, but a lot easier. And to like, Darren Radish has been unbelievable this season. His tying goal last night, that was a friggin' laser beam that he popped over that top shelf. I mean, from the point, absolutely unreal. You saw his game developing, and you thought, okay, he'll be a 30-point guy. And what he's doing this season, what they've unlocked in him, has been fantastic.
I can't help but hear Dr. Evil's voice when you say laser beam. I want sharks with freaking laser beams attached to their heads.
Yes.
To get a little more serious, though, obviously it's a super busy day for you, David, just with the freeze coming up here in a little less than 3 hours. I'm sure your phone is ringing nonstop, especially with the Artemi Panarin stuff. You know, to make another movie reference, I tweeted before, it's like Panda Watch in Anchorman.
Right, yes.
with Panarin. But,
exactly.
you know, Tampa, speaking of Tampa, they've been, you know, a team that has kind of come out as like a front runner almost to get him. Obviously, Julien Brisebois has shown to be aggressive in the past. Like, how real is this, you know, Tampa linked to Panarin's story?
I think they've explored it. I talked to him. He jumped on. We did the pregame. Dennis Bernstein and I did the pregame show for SiriusXM for the Stadium Series, and we had Brisebois on, and he mentioned something that I think piqued a lot of interest in others, where he wants to add, but if he's going to add, it's got to be a piece that benefits this team now and beyond. They're not just exclusively in the rental market. And of course, with Panarin and all the attention that has been brought over to him in the last 48 hours with Tampa, that extension is what everyone's going, well, wait a second, maybe you can, does that mean that you're trying to extend? I ran into him yesterday at the game. He was very coy. He's like, well, just doing my job, just whatever happens. I don't know. He didn't seem active at the time. He had a game to watch. But you can't count out the Tampa Bay Lightning in anything. And, you know, we know earlier on in the season there was interest in, you know, Blake Coleman, possibility of a reunion there in Tampa. He's been fishing around. He doesn't have a ton of cap space, so he's going to have to get creative. And we know that the Rangers are going to retain on Panarin's deal when it does happen. So I haven't gotten the sense that they are, I don't know if I'd put them in the front runner category, but there is obvious interest and there have been discussions. So we'll see what happens here in the next few hours. But I think Carolina's still in that mix. I think LA's still in that mix. I had heard some teams, and I reported this earlier in the week, that if it just goes rental route, I think he would consider the Dallas, the Colorado, the Edmontons, but I do think it's more heavily leaning towards an extension. I know everyone's talking about Florida. I just don't know if the Panthers have the assets that the Rangers would want in order to make that happen. So you've got to work on the contract, but also you've got to work on the trade package. And this is also different than Giroux and, you know, Marchand last year. It was just Florida. With G, I think it was Colorado and Florida when that happened. There's more options. There are more options for Panarin and for the Rangers. So I don't think these are my two teams and that's it. I think it's a broader spectrum that the Rangers and his agent are working with.
Yeah, and I think that's something that has to be considered too, right? When you think about, like, are we trading him and letting him get a contract in the East, where now we got to see him for the next foreseeable future as a New York Ranger too, playing against him in Tampa or whatever. If he ends up in Carolina, now you're dealing with him all the time. Now, the other guy that's been humming around, and I saw it on the fourth period, was Kadri, that being open to a trade. Where does that put him? Because again, there's going to be a lot of suitors lined up for a player like him who can play down your middle, and he has Stanley Cup pedigree.
Yeah, I think it's not a trade request. It's a acknowledgement that if you're going to do this, go for it. I'm not going to stand in your way. Obviously, he's got a trade list that he's going to submit, but or has and said, like, here are my options. You guys, figure it out, and I'm cool with it. It doesn't necessarily mean something will happen today. This could be something that and teams can continue to have trade negotiations during the break. Just nothing can be official until it lifts on the 22nd. But a lot of groundwork can be laid. And I think if Kadri is moved, for me, it's two things. One, I think it happens closer to the trade deadline itself. And two, I think it opens up a lot more options for what Calgary is probably going to do between now and I'd say next season. Because I think Coleman, there's a lot of smoke around Coleman. So you've got that. You've got Kadri. You move out one or both of those guys, then I think other players start to go, all right, maybe I'm willing to consider this because I don't want to go through a bit of a rebuild. And we started to hear noise about Mackenzie Weegar, and there were teams that poked around on him the last couple of years as well. There's a lot of interest in Weegar as well, but he's got a full no trade. They haven't approached him yet about that possibility. But the vets on Calgary are a pretty tight-knit group. And when you start to see Raz is gone, and maybe it's Nas next, and then Coleman next, you start to look at this and you go, I don't really want to be part of this, right now at this point in my career. So I think if Kadri's moved, I think it opens up not necessarily a full domino effect or a flurry of trades out of Calgary, but it does open up the possibility for a lot of significant moves as they go through a long overdue rebuild, but they'll probably phrase it something differently.
Yeah. That's always the way they use certain buzzwords to make it sound a little better to your fan base. And obviously a situation that we touched on here earlier, GM coaching changes and Barry Trotz steps down, right? So now the Preds are in a search for a new GM. Where does that land them? Is it somewhere in-house? Because I know Brian Poyle, the heir of David Poyle's name's been thrown around, or do they go out for a different person?
I think they're going to look externally, and this is a so they've commissioned CAA to help with the search, and then of course internally they'll decide, and Trotz will have be involved in some capacity. That's a different division of CAA. It's not like Pat Brazil and JP Barry just hanging out trying to find guys that they like. It's a different department that's going to handle things in terms of headhunting. But there are going to be some options. Now, it's a tricky time of year because we're mid-season, and some other teams don't necessarily want some of their guys getting plucked away mid-season, even if it's that jump to the GM role. So this may be something that happens summer or right before or after the draft. But there are some names out there already that I think are going to be given consideration that I'm starting to hear. Guys like Rich Peverly and Mark Yannetti, Chris Pronger. I think there are a couple others, Martin Madden as well. I think we're going to start to hear a few more names in that respect regarding the vacancy for the GM role in Nashville. But this probably is something that gets addressed at least after trade deadline, because it certainly appears like that's Trotz is going to handle that. He was close on a deal or two deals this week. We'll see if how active they get, if anything does happen before today's deadline. But those are in the hands of Barry Trotz. Everything else will be a little bit later on. But the other thing I'm curious about is, do they go the president and then GM route? Because Brendan Shanahan's name is one that I don't think he's interested in the GM or a GM role. I think he's more interested in where he was in Toronto, president of the club, and then you bring in somebody handling the hockey ops. But I think he's thrown his hat in there. And actually made it known to the Preds earlier on in the season that if they do go in this direction, he would like to have a discussion about it.
Dave, just the last one I got to ask for you here quickly while we're talking about Barry Trotz, one of his former teams, the New York Islanders. They've been active already so far in the trade department. They've got the money. They've got the assets. Is it safe to assume they're going to do something else before the deadline comes up on March 6th?
They're looking. Wouldn't surprise me if they do. Matthew Darche has not been – he's not sitting on his hands by any stretch. He's made some shrewd moves already. Like you said, he made a couple moves last week in bringing in Soucy and Palat. I think they're around $6 million in cap space, something like that still. So they've got flexibility to add, and I think they're going to take that. I don't necessarily think we're going to see something today, probably more geared towards closer to trade deadline. But I think they're going to take advantage of where they're at. Nice way to come back yesterday, collect some points, get back in a bit of a comfort zone, standings-wise. Yeah. I think we'll see. Look, I'm not making the call, so I'm not on the trade calls, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do something else to add to this group.
Thank you for the time, Dave, today. We really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of that bright sun in Tampa before you get back to Toronto. And keep repping that college hockey merch. I saw you in the Oklahoma State hat the other day. That's good stuff. So safe travels. You're the best.
Got more. Let's go.
There we go. Thanks, Pegs.
Later, guys.
All right. So to wrap up today's show, Huts, we got garbage time. I believe today's topic in garbage time is the Olympic line.
That's first.
Ooh, sorry.
That's okay, buddy. We got you. We're just
Tyler would kill me for that one. So bets first, presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Do you want me to lead off with my bet for tonight?
No, we're gonna dissect what Patty did last night. You see those red, Patty? This is good, Johnny. Maybe you're what we need. You got to come on more often because usually it's Green and Patty's scenario, but last night he missed his. Finally, Patty.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tampa hit, Carolina hit. It's just betting on the hometown, Edmonton Oilers. That's the problem for me. Every time I bet on Edmonton, it seems to go bad. So it's a lesson that I need to learn.
Well, Johnny's learning it's a homer show. Now, Johnny, it's your turn to
tell us
your bet, my man.
Okay, I'm being a little creative tonight. Quinn Hughes has been one of the hottest players in the NHL since the turn of the calendar. I'm taking Quinn Hughes to have 2+ points tonight. He's got 25 points in his last 16 games, averaging just about a little over 1.5 point per game, and the Minnesota Wild are buzzing. The power play is clicking and firing, and I like Quinn Hughes to have 2+ points tonight. You guys?
Well, I know I just said that I shouldn't bet on the Edmonton Oilers, but just judging how last night went, I'm taking Edmonton at -1.5 versus Calgary at +180. We just lost to Toronto. We can't lose to Calgary going into the break. McDavid is not going to let that happen. So for +180, I think the Oilers take it to the Calgary Flames tonight. What about you, Hutz?
I like that bet. I wonder if McDavid saves a little bit because he looked like he was limping there after that Carlo hit. But I'm going with the Montreal Canadiens against Winnipeg Jets money line, and I'm staying on that red-hot Columbus Blue Jackets. I think there's going to be too much pressure on this team to stop now. Keep going. +218. Let's do it. I got to cash in while Ty's gone.
I like it. We got a 10-game slate tonight, so lots of hockey to bounce around from. Not the greatest matchups. Last night we saw more divisional matchups and rivalries and whatnot. Tonight, still a lot of action to get in on, so should be a fun night. And now we can get into garbage time, so I apologize for jumping ahead there. But we got the Olympic line of Brad Marchand, Tom Wilson, Sam Bennett that have over $3 million in salary through fines and suspensions. So knowing how the IIHF rules work, it's safe to assume that one of them might be tossed from a game in the Olympics. Carter, what do you make of this?
And that's the point. Someone in the chat said it earlier, with Wilson, with Marchand, these guys have to play on the edge to be, dominate and to help this team, but they can't go over it because then the thing, like a power play at the wrong time can change the whole dynamic of the game. So I feel like with this lineup and these players, you got to play between the whistles and you have to be smart. There can't be anything that goes without saying, because you look at the fines that they've wrapped up. Now it goes to the players' emergency fund for families. So I love it. I don't know if it still works for alumni, but there's a lot of extra money sitting around from these boys to help the rest of the guys out.
And we just had a question in the chat. I want to pull up who asked it if we can get it back on the screen, Pat. But does Canada have too much grit? That's a question we're getting in the chat. Obviously, it's never a bad thing to have grit. This is from Knockout Panda 5. We're speaking of Panda Watch. What do you think of that?
No, I don't think so. I think when you look at Team USA as your big matchup in Sweden and Finland, these other teams, you need that depth down the lineup. And let's not say like Tom Wilson is a grinder. Like this is a guy that can create offense. This is a guy that can be a difference maker. And you have those players in a star role. It's just playing into the role you're needed is going to be top priority and not going over the line again. Because now when you think about the Chucks and Team USA, a bigger body trying to press on you, you have a little bit of a pushback and then you just go let your stars be your stars. And a power play here or there changes the whole dynamic for Team Canada, in my opinion, Johnny.
All right, Carter, any final thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
No, it was great having you on, buddy. I thought you were awesome. I love getting to work with you. Ty is, who knows where Ty is? I think he's at the airport. He's going somewhere warm, and he's probably having a beer right now, enjoying himself.
Waste management,
shame on him, and
right?
We're working. Yeah, waste management.
Nice.
We're working our guts out
sick.
here, and he's out enjoying himself.
Yeah, he deserves it. I owe him one. He filled in on our show a lot last week, as did you. So I owe you one whenever you need it. But big thank you to everyone for listening. Big thank you to you, Carter. Thank you to Tyler for allowing me to sit here. And big thank you to our producer, Pat Puff. Great show today, and we will catch you tomorrow.
Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Jonny, Lazarus, and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.